They say every city has its ghosts, some buried in graveyards, others walking among the living, disguised as memory. But in the winter of 1983, one man made it his mission to find them. Not the dead, but the ones who vanished between truth and nightmare. His name was Elias Koren, and he called himself the Tracker of Shadows. For decades, he followed trails no one else dared to see. Footprints that disappeared in fog, whispers carried through broken radios, photographs where faces shouldn't exist. What began as an obsession became a science, and what began as science became a curse. Now let's go back, before the name, before the legend. To the beginning of the man who tried to map the darkness itself. Before we dive deeper into this disturbing story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden stories. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it right now for you? I love seeing how far these untold truths reach. Elias Koren was born in a remote mountain village in northern Romania, a place forgotten by time and untouched by light. His father was a hunter, quiet, disciplined, and brutal. His mother, a teacher who once taught literature in Bucharest, had fled the city after a scandal no one dared to speak about. From the day he learned to walk, Elias was taught to listen, not to people, but to silence. The forests around their home spoke in strange patterns. Trees creaked as if breathing, and wolves moved in perfect rhythm with the wind. When Elias was 9, his father went missing during a snowstorm. The men of the village found only his hunting rifle, buried upright in the snow, as though planted by invisible hands. His tracks led in a straight line into the woods and then stopped, mid-stride, mid-motion, as if the earth had swallowed him whole. That night, Elias's mother told him, "Some things don't disappear, Elias, they just change their shape." That was the first time he saw the shadows. In the years that followed, Elias became obsessed with understanding that night. He studied meteorology, human tracking, and forensic anthropology, eventually joining a government unit in the 1970s known unofficially as Section 13. Its purpose was simple: to investigate disappearances that didn't make sense, missing scientists, erased files, and villages wiped off maps during the Cold War, the kind of cases that couldn't be explained by politics or crime. The world was divided back then, but darkness doesn't follow borders. From East Berlin to the Carpathians, Elias followed trails that led to nothing but questions. He'd arrive at abandoned research stations where clocks had stopped at the same hour, or mountain paths where footprints looped back upon themselves. Every time he found a trace, it was gone the next day, erased, as if reality itself was correcting a mistake. And yet, someone or something seemed to be following him too. He first noticed it in 1974, while stationed near the Yugoslav border. The reports were simple. 5 border guards vanished on patrol without gunfire, without distress calls. Only their radios were found, each broadcasting a faint voice repeating the same phrase in distorted Romanian, "We are not lost." Elias traced the transmission back to an abandoned monastery built into a cliff. Inside, he found marks on the walls, hundreds of handprints burned into stone. But the strange part wasn't the handprints. It was that they all belonged to the same person. Elias documented everything, every anomaly, every strange occurrence. His colleagues thought he was losing his mind. One even wrote in a classified memo, "Koren exhibits obsessive behaviors toward unprovable phenomena, possibly delusional." But Elias didn't care, because he'd seen something no report could explain. During one of his late-night investigations, he found a woman, or something that looked like a woman, standing in the snow. Her hair was long and black, her clothes dated by decades, and her eyes glowed with faint metallic reflection like a wolf's in the dark. She whispered to him, "Stop following what has no face." When he blinked, she was gone, leaving behind only a trail of ash that melted into the frost. From that night on, Elias's purpose changed. He stopped tracking people. He began tracking shadows, not as metaphors but as real entities that moved unseen through human history. His theory, documented in secret journals, was this: that human consciousness leaves echoes, remnants of intense emotion, trauma, and memory, and that sometimes those echoes take physical form. He believed the world was full of them, invisible residues walking beside us, influencing our choices, rewriting our history. By 1979, Section 13 was disbanded under accusations of psychological misconduct and manipulation of classified data. Most members were reassigned or vanished. Elias disappeared too, last seen boarding a freight train headed west. For 10 years, no one heard from him. But then, in 1983, a journalist named Mara Valen received a brown envelope at her office in Vienna. Inside was a reel of 8mm film labeled The Tracker of Shadows, property of EK. When she played it, she saw grainy footage of empty roads, forests, and blurred figures moving in slow motion, like ghosts trapped on camera. And at the end of the film, a voice, unmistakably Elias's, whispered, "If you are watching this, they've found me." The tape ignited an investigation that would haunt European media for years. Mara traced the reel's origin to a remote cabin in the Austrian Alps. There, she found walls covered with maps, red string connecting locations of disappearances across Europe, photographs of faces with eyes scratched out, and notes written in Latin, Russian, and what appeared to be Romanian dialects mixed with cipher codes. In the center of the cabin was a single typewriter, and beside it a journal open to the last written page. They move when we forget them. They stop when we remember. I am not the first tracker, but I might be the last. From that point, Mara Valen dedicated her life to finding out what happened to Elias Koren. Her notes became the foundation of one of the most disturbing investigations ever recorded, an intersection of espionage, folklore, and human psychology. She interviewed dozens of witnesses, all of whom reported similar experiences: shadows that watched from corners, whispers that mimicked voices of the dead, and dreams that seemed shared among strangers. What began as myth slowly began to resemble method. By late 1984, she discovered evidence that Section 13 hadn't been shut down. It had been absorbed by another covert branch of NATO, working on psychological warfare and experimental perception control. Elias, she suspected, hadn't vanished by choice. He'd been taken. The reason? His research into shadow resonance, a theory suggesting that human emotion could distort physical space. When Mara attempted to publish her findings, her editor was found dead in his apartment. The official cause, heart failure. But the surveillance footage from that night showed something chilling. Seconds before his death, the room's lights flickered and a dark silhouette appeared behind him, moving in perfect sync with his every motion, like a reflection that had stepped out of the mirror. She knew then that Elias's warning wasn't paranoia. It was prophecy. Still, she pressed on. She tracked down an old contact of Elias's, a linguist named Dr. Pavel Ion. He confirmed the existence of Section 13's secret project, codenamed Umbra Protocol. The objective: to weaponize fear by inducing collective hallucinations through electromagnetic manipulation. But something had gone wrong. The experiment had worked too well. The hallucinations had become autonomous. According to Pavel, Elias had been the only one who could see them without losing his sanity, the only one who could predict where they'd appear next. That's why they called him the Tracker of Shadows. But in the process of tracking them, he'd become connected to them, not as hunter, but as host. Mara's final known journal entry, dated December 18, 1984, reads, "He's still out there. I've seen him. Not in person, in reflection, on glass, on film, in photographs that weren't supposed to contain him. He's aging backward, or maybe time doesn't apply to him anymore. They said the shadows move when we forget them. Maybe that's why stories like this survive, because remembering is the only thing keeping them away." To this day, the name Elias Koren appears in no official archive. Section 13's existence is still denied by every government it was rumored to serve, and yet, across forgotten mountain towns and crumbling institutions, witnesses still speak of a tall man in a dark coat carrying an old camera, walking alone at night, following something none of us can see. Some say he's still tracking the same shadow that took his father. Others say he became one of them. Whatever the truth is, when the night is quiet and the air is heavy with memory, people still whisper, "He's watching the darkness, so it doesn't watch us." When the lights flickered in her Vienna apartment that night, Mara Valen didn't move. She just sat there, pen frozen mid-sentence, as the shadow on the far wall began to move independently of her. It wasn't fast. It wasn't even human in its pace. It simply shifted, like smoke taking on a vague, deliberate form. Then the phone rang, a shrill mechanical scream that shattered the silence. Mara answered, trembling, expecting a voice. But there was only static, and then a faint whisper. "He's not dead. He's between." The line went dead. That was the moment Mara realized she wasn't investigating a missing man anymore. She was walking into the same darkness that had swallowed him. The next morning, she packed her camera, her notes, and the 8mm reel, and boarded the earliest train east. Destination, Transylvania. If Elias had left a trail, that's where it would lead. The cabin in Austria had been just a station, not the source. His writings had mentioned a place again and again, Valea Negra, the Black Valley. Local records didn't show it. No maps did. But in the archives of a defunct research center, she'd found a hand-drawn coordinate system, ink faded and numbers scratched out, pointing toward a remote mountain pass on the Romanian border. According to a footnote, the area had been restricted since 1976, radiation risk. But the margin note, in Elias's handwriting, said something else entirely. Not radiation, resonance. It took her 3 days to reach the valley, and when she did, it didn't appear as a valley at all, more like a wound carved into the mountains. The air felt heavier there, as though the atmosphere itself was dense with memory. Villagers from the last inhabited settlement, Tisnov, refused to go near it. One old man, pale-eyed, wrapped in animal skins, told her, "People don't vanish there. They get rewritten." He said Elias had come there once too, years ago, carrying a camera and a metal case filled with strange instruments that hummed in the night. He said he was mapping sound, the man whispered. But what kind of sound needs a compass? Mara didn't sleep that night. She reviewed Elias's reel over and over in her portable projector, slowing it frame by frame. And somewhere, hidden between the flickers of the film, she found something no one else had noticed. Coordinates, faint, burned into the edge of the celluloid like a watermark. The next morning, she followed them. The coordinates led to the ruins of an old Soviet research facility buried in frost and fog. The entrance was sealed, but the air vent shafts were open, rusted wide enough for her to crawl through. Inside, the halls were lined with decaying signs. Laboratorial de Psychographie, Laboratory of Psychography. The deeper she went, the stranger it got. The walls were covered with strange geometric carvings, spirals, eyes and circular diagrams like mandalas etched into metal. In one room, she found a line of recording equipment still powered by weak, flickering bulbs. The machines weren't Soviet-made. They were Western, American, perhaps British. And on a metal shelf sat 3 unmarked tapes. Each was labeled with a single letter, EK13. Her heart sank. Elias Koren, Section 13. When she played the first tape, a crackling voice filled the room. It was him. Elias, calm, focused, speaking like a man who had spent years alone. Experiment log, umbra resonance, entry 27, date unknown. The pattern continues. The shadows appear in intervals of memory density, emotional frequency, not time. The stronger the memory, the deeper the distortion. I can't tell if they're drawn to fear or feeding from it. If anyone hears this, know this. They are reflections, but reflections that learn to survive without mirrors. Mara froze the tape. Around her the lights flickered again, faintly, like a heartbeat pulsing through the power line. She whispered into the dark, "Elias, are you still here?" And for a moment, from somewhere deep in the halls, she heard the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing closer. The second tape was worse. Entry 32, subject exposure test. I recorded my voice onto magnetic film and played it backward through the resonance amplifier. For 3 minutes, nothing. Then the shadows began to respond. Not by sound, by movement. They imitated me. They moved like I did, but delayed, like reflections with lag. I think they're learning, adapting. Then came static, and under it, a faint whisper of something not human. Distorted, breathless, layered, as though 1,000 versions of the same voice were speaking from inside the recording. Mara's hands shook as she ejected the tape. The third one, labeled 13, she hesitated before playing. Something about it felt wrong. The air around her felt charged, metallic. She pressed play anyway. Entry 41, termination phase. They've begun using my memories against me. My father, my mother. I see them when I close my eyes, but they're not them. They're projections. Echoes wearing familiar faces. The resonance field has expanded beyond control. If I shut it down, it might stop. Or it might erase me completely. Either way, it ends here. If Mara Valen finds this, tell her she's next. The tape ended. Mara stumbled back, heart pounding. He had recorded this knowing she would find it. But how could he have known her name before they'd ever met? Unless the shadows could move through time. That night she slept inside the facility, or tried to. The snowstorm outside made escape impossible. But sometime after midnight, the hum began again. The same electrical vibration Elias had described. The metal walls shimmered faintly, and her reflection, distorted in the broken glass, began to move without her. Mara turned. The reflection didn't. It smiled. She ran, flashlight beam shaking, through corridors that seemed to loop in impossible directions, hallways folding into each other, exits vanishing behind her. Every door she opened led to the same room, the same desk, the same flickering light. It was like the building itself was remembering her. Finally, she reached the main chamber, the source of the humming. A machine stood in the center, surrounded by cracked monitors. It looked like a mix between a radar array and a radio telescope built from scavenged parts. On one of the screens, an image flickered, a faint human silhouette, standing in the snow, looking back at the camera. It was Elias, except his shadow wasn't his own. It was standing beside him. Mara stayed there until dawn. When the storm cleared, she found her way back to the surface, disoriented and shaking. On the horizon, she saw a man walking along the ridge, coat torn, face hidden beneath a hood. She called out. The man stopped, turned, and for an instant she saw him clearly, Elias, exactly as he appeared in the film reel. Not aged, not changed, frozen in time. He raised a hand slowly as if warning her. Then the light shifted and he was gone, replaced by nothing but a trail of melted snow leading into the mist. Back in Vienna, Mara tried to tell her story. No one listened. The institute she'd worked for claimed she'd fabricated the tapes. The official reports on Section 13 disappeared. Her passport was revoked. Her editor's death was reopened as a suicide. Within months, her reputation was destroyed. But she didn't stop. For the next 2 years, she gathered every trace of Elias's research, fragments of blueprints, scattered interviews, old film negatives. The deeper she went, the stranger it became. In photographs taken decades apart, she began to see the same figure in the background, a man in a dark coat, always out of focus, sometimes behind crowds, sometimes behind her. And then came the photographs of herself. One morning, she received an envelope, no return address. Inside were 3 Polaroids. In each, she was asleep in her own apartment. And in the reflection of the window beside her, stood Elias. On the back of one photo, written in faint, shaking ink, were 4 words. You've already been seen. In 1986, Mara vanished. Her last known contact was a letter mailed to a journalist friend in Prague. In it, she wrote, I finally understand what he meant by resonance. It isn't sound. It's memory. The shadows aren't haunting us. We're haunting them. Every memory we refuse to release becomes a thing with form, with hunger. We give them life by holding on. I'm going to find him. Or join him. Maybe there's no difference. No one ever found her body. But 1 year later, a team of hikers discovered something deep in the Carpathian woods. A camera, half buried in the soil. Inside it was a roll of undeveloped film. When processed, the photos revealed the same valley, the same facility, and one final image. Mara, standing beside Elias Koren. Both looking into the camera, and behind them, dozens of human silhouettes stretching into the trees, perfectly still. Each had no face. Each cast no shadow. Today, those photos are locked inside an evidence archive in Bucharest. Access is restricted, but according to the archivist who leaked their existence in 1997, something strange happens every time the film is exposed to light. New silhouettes appear in the background, as if the story never ends, as if the shadows keep tracking themselves. For 30 years, the story of Elias Corin and Mara Valen existed only in whispers, part myth, part classified rumor. The Cold War ended, borders dissolved, and the ghosts of history faded into data. But the shadows, they never stopped moving. They just learned to hide in new ways. In 2015, a doctoral researcher named Dr. Adrian Keller came across a declassified NATO document while studying forgotten psychological operations from the 1970s. The document was barely legible, half-redacted, filled with stains and codes, but one phrase stood out like a scar. Umbra Protocol terminated, remnants uncontained, subject EK. He didn't know it yet, but that single reference would unravel his life. Adrian was a rational man, scientist to the core. He studied human perception, memory, and cognitive bias. Ghost stories meant nothing to him. Superstition was a language he never spoke. But something about Umbra Protocol disturbed him. There was no trace of it in any NATO database, no funding record, no project description. And yet, he found scattered references to a Section 13 in Cold War intelligence chatter, mostly connected to Eastern Europe and psychological experiments. The deeper he dug, the more the same two names surfaced, Elias Corin and Mara Valen. He found fragments of their story in obscure academic journals, censored newspaper clippings, even paranormal forums. Most dismissed it as urban legend. But one grainy photograph on a forgotten Romanian blog changed everything. It showed the ruined facility at Valea Neagra, and faintly, through the broken glass, two silhouettes, one male, one female. The caption read, "The last known image of the trackers." Adrian stared at it for hours. Then he noticed something behind them, a reflection on the metal wall. Shapes, dozens of them. But what chilled him was that among those shapes, one silhouette matched his own posture exactly. His frame, his way of standing, even the tilt of his head. He laughed it off at first. Coincidence, pattern recognition, pareidolia. But deep down something shifted. Curiosity began turning into obsession. A month later, he boarded a flight to Bucharest. Officially, he told his university he was attending a conference on cognitive resonance. Unofficially, he was going after ghosts. Through a contact at the National Archives, he got access to sealed boxes labeled Sectia 13, 1978-1983. Inside were reels of microfilm, faded maps, and handwritten reports stamped, classified, eyes only. Most of it was noise, bureaucratic jargon, and false leads, until he found a folder marked Psychographic Experiments, subject EK13. Inside was a single photograph of Elias Corin. The date said 1978. The man looked mid-30s, gaunt but alert, eyes intense, as if he was staring right through the camera lens. On the back of the photo, someone had written in red pencil, "If seen after 1983, do not engage. Subject unstable, resonance contamination." Adrian's hands trembled. He checked the timestamp again. 1983, the year Elias vanished. He decided to visit Valea Neagra himself. The location had been restricted for decades, but modern GPS data placed it within a forgotten military exclusion zone. Locals warned him against going. "It's cursed," they said. "People go there to disappear." He rented a jeep and drove through the winding mountain roads until the asphalt gave way to gravel. Then to silence. No birds, no insects. Just wind brushing through dead trees like whispered breath. By late afternoon, he reached what was left of the facility. The entrance was caved in, the walls scrawled with graffiti. He stepped inside with a flashlight, camera, and recorder. Every echo felt alive. Every creak sounded like memory stretching. In the control room, he found relics of the past, decayed equipment, mold-covered tapes, and on a rusted table, a shattered photograph frame. The image inside was water-damaged, but the faces were faintly visible, Mara and Elias, both staring straight at the camera. Behind them, those same faceless silhouettes again. He turned on his recorder. Entry 1. Valea Neagra. The air feels wrong, like static before lightning. There's no electromagnetic field registered, but my compass is spinning. I can't explain it yet. As he spoke, a sound interrupted him. faint humming, rhythmic, low. It was coming from somewhere beneath the floor. He found a staircase descending into the sub-basement, half submerged in ice and darkness. The deeper he went, the louder the humming grew. It wasn't mechanical. It felt biological, like a pulse. At the bottom stood a single metal door. On it, scratched by hand, were the words, "Do not forget." He pushed it open. Inside was a small chamber, walls lined with rusted recording equipment. And in the center, a chair, wired to dozens of analog dials and cables. It looked like an experimental resonance interface built to measure human thought through vibration. On the chair's armrest lay a notebook sealed in plastic. The first page was soaked, but legible. "If anyone finds this, remember, you are already part of it." It was signed, Elias Corin. Adrian spent hours reading. The notes were scattered but brilliant. Diagrams linking emotion to frequency, formulas describing shadow density, and theories about how memories create spatial distortions. But near the end, the handwriting became unstable, almost frantic. "They don't exist outside of us. They are us. The things we forget become them. Every lost memory, every unspoken guilt forms a body in the dark. The more we deny, the more they grow. They are the sum of everything humanity refuses to remember." He turned the page and froze. There, stapled to the paper, was a photograph. It showed him, standing exactly where he was right now, inside the same chamber. The recorder clicked. He hadn't pressed play, but it turned on by itself, emitting faint static. Then through the noise, a voice spoke, hoarse, calm, familiar. "Adrian Keller, you shouldn't have come here." He spun around. No one. The room was empty, but the voice continued. "You think you're studying me. You're completing me. Every time someone remembers my story, it pulls me back." The light flickered. His reflection appeared on the glass panel, except the reflection was moving faster than him, reacting before he did. Its eyes glowed faintly silver. Adrian stumbled back, gasping. His recorder dropped, still running. The voice whispered again. "Now that you've found me." "They'll find you." The machines around him whirred to life. The hum deepened into a vibration he could feel in his bones. The shadows on the walls began to shift, stretch, and take form. Human outlines crawling across surfaces, merging, multiplying. They weren't attached to anything. They were independent. He bolted for the exit, but the corridors had changed. The layout was impossible. Every turn led back to the same metal door. His flashlight began to dim, the battery draining unnaturally fast. The air itself pulsed like a living organism. Then, silence. And from behind him, a voice, quiet, exhausted, human. "You see it now, don't you?" He turned. A man stood there. Tall, wearing a dark coat, eyes sunken yet burning with eerie calm. Elias Corin. Adrian's breath caught. "You're alive?" Elias smiled faintly. Alive isn't the right word. He stepped closer. The Umbra protocol wasn't a failure. It worked. We mapped fear. We gave it form, and now it doesn't need us anymore. Elias's shadow on the wall shifted independently. It turned its head while he remained still. "You came here because you thought you were investigating me. But you were invited. The moment you saw the photo, the pattern recognized you. You became part of it." Adrian's voice trembled. "What are they?" "Memory," Elias said softly. "Everything humanity refuses to face. Grief, guilt, regret. When you bury emotion deep enough, it becomes energy. Energy becomes form. And once it has form," he looked around the dark walls, "it learns to look back. You can't kill what remembers you." The lights flickered again, and Elias was gone. Adrian staggered out into the snow at dawn, numb and half delirious. His camera had captured fragments, flickers of motion, human shapes forming in the fog. When he returned to Bucharest, he reviewed the footage frame by frame. In one frame, Elias's face appeared clearly, staring straight at the lens. But in the next frame, his features dissolved into static, replaced by dozens of overlapping eyes. He posted a short excerpt online under an anonymous username, claiming it was evidence of psychogenic resonance phenomena. Within 48 hours, the post vanished. His computer was wiped remotely. The next day, he received a message on his phone from an untraceable number. Stop feeding them. But it was too late. The footage had already spread, reposted, mirrored, analyzed. Every person who watched it saw something different. Some saw shadows move behind their reflection. Others heard whispers calling their name. Reports of mirrored figures began appearing across Europe. Psychologists dismissed it as mass hysteria, a viral hallucination amplified by internet folklore. But Adrian knew better. He could feel it, the hum in his apartment walls, the flicker in every mirror, the faint outline that moved when he didn't. One night, he set up a camera facing his reflection and recorded himself sleeping. In the morning, the footage showed his body still, but his reflection rising from the bed, standing at the edge of the frame, watching him. Then, at 3:17 a.m., the reflection turned toward the camera and smiled. 3 weeks later, Adrian Keller vanished. The authorities found his apartment empty, lights on, food untouched, a faint smell of ozone in the air. His hard drives were melted internally, as though exposed to intense magnetic energy. Only one thing remained intact, a note taped to his computer monitor. He's still tracking them, and now they're tracking us. Here. The bottom was a symbol, a circular spiral, surrounded by 13 dots. The same symbol that had been carved on the walls of Section 13's facility 40 years earlier. Since then, new sightings have surfaced. Hikers in the Carpathians report seeing a man in a dark coat walking through the snow, carrying a broken camera. In Berlin, security footage from an underground station shows a tall figure standing in front of a mirror for hours, motionless, waiting, and when the guards arrived, both the man and his reflection were gone. Even in cities far away, people claim to hear faint humming at night, like a heartbeat echoing from somewhere just beneath reality. No one knows if Elias Corin ever truly died. No one knows if the shadows were ever contained. But one thing remains certain. Every time his story is told, the hum grows louder. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's how they survive. Through us remembering them. Through you remembering them. Because if Elias was right, and the shadows only move when we forget, then right now, as you listen to this, they've already started moving again. The rain fell like a curtain that night, thick and cold, drowning out every whisper of the forest. Elias trudged through the drenched soil, the beam of his lantern trembling against the relentless wind. His boots sank deep into the mud, but he didn't slow down. He could still see the faint trail of footprints, light, uneven, as if the person had been staggering. They led toward the edge of the ravine. For days he'd been chasing this shadow, the one they said moved like smoke and vanished like fog. But Elias knew better. He knew that shadows didn't vanish. They simply hid in places people feared to look. He stopped beneath a leaning pine tree, its branches groaning under the weight of the storm. In the distance, lightning cracked open the sky, just enough to reveal the silhouette of something standing still on the ridge. A figure, too far to make out, but close enough for him to feel the pull of obsession tightening around his ribs. He raised the lantern higher, whispering into the wind, "I know you're there." The words were swallowed by thunder. When the light flickered again, the ridge was empty. But the tracks continued. Elias followed them down the slope until the ground turned to stone and the forest opened into an ancient burial ground, forgotten by maps, untouched by time. Dozens of stone markers jutted out of the earth, their inscriptions erased by centuries of rain. In the center stood a broken monument, split clean down the middle. The air here felt wrong, heavy, like breath held too long. Elias placed his hand on the cracked stone and felt a pulse beneath it, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat under the earth. He pulled back, startled, his breath quickening. He wasn't alone. Something moved between the graves, a faint shimmer, like heat distortion in the rain. Elias froze, watching it twist and waver before solidifying into a figure. The same one he had seen on the ridge. It stood perfectly still, face obscured by the storm, arms hanging by its sides. For a long moment, neither moved. The rain seemed to pause between them. Then, the figure tilted its head, the motion strange, almost curious, and spoke. "You shouldn't have followed." The voice was not human. It wasn't deep or high, but layered, as if several voices spoke at once. Elias stepped back, lantern shaking in his grip.
"Who are you?"
he demanded. "What are you?" The figure stepped forward, and for the first time Elias saw its face, or rather, the absence of one. Where features should have been, there was a shifting veil of darkness, moving like smoke trapped under glass. In its surface he saw flashes of faces, men, women, children, hundreds of them, fading in and out like memories of the dead. "I am what you've been chasing," the figure said. "And you've been looking for me for a long time." Elias tried to speak, but his throat closed. "That's impossible," he whispered. "You're not real. Then why are you afraid?" The question sliced through him. Because he was afraid, terrified. But not of dying. He was afraid of what he might discover if he kept going. All his life he'd hunted shadows, convinced there was logic behind the madness, order behind the disappearances. But now, staring at this thing, he wasn't sure where the line between man and myth began anymore. The figure took another step forward, its form dissolving with every movement, blending with the storm. "You think you're the tracker," it said softly. "But you're the one being followed." Elias's heartbeat pounded in his ears. "Followed? By what?" "By what you've become." The ground trembled beneath his feet. The graves around him began to crack open, not from within, but as if the earth itself was exhaling centuries of trapped souls. The shadows spilled out, swirling around him in a frenzy of whispering voices. He stumbled back, dropping the lantern. The flame sputtered, casting wild flashes of light across the burial ground. And in those flashes Elias saw faces, not of strangers, but of everyone he'd lost. His wife, his child, his mentor. Their eyes hollow, their mouths moving in silent screams. "No," Elias gasped. "You're not real." "This isn't..." The figure's voice cut through the chaos. "You wanted to find what hides in darkness. But you never asked what darkness wants in return." The wind roared, extinguishing the lantern completely. For a heartbeat, everything was black. Then, a sudden burst of light exploded behind the monument, revealing a symbol carved deep into the stone, glowing faintly through the rain. Elias recognized it instantly. The same mark found at every site he'd investigated, the same one that had haunted his dreams for years. He approached it slowly, unable to resist. "What does it mean?" he whispered. The shadow's voice lowered. "It means you were chosen long before you started searching." Elias reached out and touched the symbol. The ground split open beneath him, a blinding surge of energy ripping through the soil. The storm seemed to fold in on itself, and for a brief, agonizing second he saw everything. The missing people, the rituals, the faces of the ones who came before him, all connected by the same curse, all driven by the same hunger to know. When he woke, he was lying in the mud. The rain had stopped. The burial ground was silent. But something was wrong. The monument was gone, as if it had never existed. And the tracks? They now led away from him, fresh human footprints heading back toward the village. He rose slowly, trembling, every muscle screaming in pain. His lantern was shattered, but the faint glow of dawn crept through the clouds. He followed the tracks out of instinct, his mind numb. But after only a few steps, he noticed something carved into the nearest gravestone, his own name, Elias Vaughn, born 1879, died 1924. He staggered back, breath ragged, heart pounding in disbelief. His fingers traced the letters, cold and deep, etched long ago. The edges of the world began to blur, as if reality itself were peeling away. He looked toward the village in the distance, a faint shimmer, unreal, dissolving like mist under sunlight. The figure's voice echoed faintly behind him. "Every tracker becomes what he hunts. Every shadow leaves a mark." And as the sun finally broke through the clouds, Elias saw his reflection in a puddle. It wasn't his face anymore. It was shifting, dark and empty, just like the figure he'd been chasing. He dropped to his knees, realization cutting through him like ice. The shadow hadn't been his prey. It had been his replacement. He looked once more toward the forest, his voice breaking into the quiet morning. "Who will find me now?" But there was no answer. Only the rustle of leaves and the sound of footsteps, faint, human, moving deeper into the woods. If you love the darkness, stay with us. Subscribe before the lights go out.